Metro on WDET. I'm Robin Vincent. Vetoes aren't just polite refusals. They're vital checks of power between executive and legislative branches at every level of government. But when the city council doesn't grasp how vetoes work, things can get heated. During a recent city council meeting in Highland Park, confusion over veto authority sparked a heated moment with a dramatic walkout by a council member. City council had previously voted to cease a contract with a consulting firm. The mayor vetoed that decision, and then the city council was tasked with upholding or overruling the mayor's veto, as per the city's charter. Let's listen to the exchange between council member Khurshid Ashafi and President Jamal Thomas at the August 4th meeting.
We've made numerous motions, numerous times at this council. If we give her that authority, if any council member gives her the authority to veto anything that this council says, you are, pardon my language, a fool.
Okay, now I'm going to stop you right there because we're going to call for the vote. You're misconstruing the facts. You're misconstruing the facts.
No.
Can we go ahead and call for the vote, Madam Deputy Clerk? Please go right ahead.
What she quoted
we have
here,
a motion on
she
the
does
floor
not have the
to
authority
overturn the veto made by Councilman Ashafi, supported by Councilwoman Martin. Would you go ahead and call the roll on that, please?
So much for civility. Metro producer Jack Philbrand spoke with Detroit documenters Caitlin Santer and Linnell Herndon to unpack this tension and decode what went wrong.
Highland Park is a city right inside of Detroit. It's surrounded by Detroit on all sides, and they are minimally resourced and do not have other, media coverage of their city council and the happenings in their government. We were approached and asked if we could also monitor their city council sessions, and we agreed, which is rare. In fact, we do not cover any other city outside of Detroit, except for Highland Park. We're Detroit documenters, and we only concentrate on what's happening in Detroit, and Highland Park is kind of inside of Detroit, like literally physically. So we do that, and we will cover state and county meetings in as much as they affect Detroit.
Caitlin, you've been covering these meetings for some time now. Can you talk about what you have been seeing at Highland Park City Council meetings?
It's always eventful. There's never a dull moment in Highland Park City Council meetings. This past meeting on August 4th was the first time I had seen a council member storm out after a vote was made while cussing out the rest of the council. So, that was really remarkable to me and is definitely different than how I would assume most city councils run and definitely how Detroit City Council does things. There's a lot more professionalism there, and this was not on display at the Highland Park City Council meeting last week.
The council's lack of professionalism has also led to frustration from community members, too. Here's resident Melinda Jones speaking during public comment.
My daughter is 9 years old, and she's very interested in the politics of the city. I explain to her every meeting after the meeting what has occurred, what you all voted on, what that means for our city. For example, a few weeks ago, the zoning thing that was voted on. She didn't understand what was happening. And I explained to her that now that property doesn't have a zone, and now she gets what that means. So for any city council member to sit in this meeting and curse the way that he did is disrespectful to every citizen in this community, especially the children. Because what example are we setting for them for the future? What example are we setting for them for the upcoming leadership? Because we all are going to have to leave at some point. Every one of you are not going to get in a seat for the rest of your lives.
No, ma'am.
At some point, this 9-year-old is going to be a 30-year-old who might be sitting on the city council. And what example does she have to follow?
One of the things that really surrounded this last Highland Park City Council meeting was McKenna and a veto made by the mayor. Caitlin, can you talk to us about how it came up at the most recent City Council meeting?
McKenna is a consulting firm that helps local governments and municipalities with city planning, zoning enforcement, things like that. And in Highland Park, they were helping with editing some ordinances, and it's my understanding that they were enforcing certain ordinances as well. And so when the mayor vetoed this decision that City Council had made at the meeting before to fire McKenna because they were enforcing an ordinance that City Council had put a moratorium on, that was a very dramatic decision that didn't seem at all to be made in advance. They didn't seem to have very many facts about what McKenna was doing in Highland Park. They were voting at this most recent meeting whether or not they wanted to uphold the mayor's veto, which would have meant that if they upheld the veto, McKenna was not fired. But if they decided not to uphold it, their decision from the last meeting would have stayed, and McKenna would have been fired and no longer helping Highland Park with city planning services and enforcement.
Where does Highland Park stand with McKenna Associates? Are they still being contracted by the city?
Yes. So at this latest meeting, they did vote 3-2. City Council voted 3-2 to uphold the mayor's veto of their past decision to fire McKenna Associates. So that means McKenna is still operating, as far as we know, in Highland Park.
City council members, as we saw in the meeting, were also kind of confused about McKenna Associates and their role when it comes to vetoes. In this situation, can you explain to us how vetoes work in local government?
Right. Well, yes. In government, the way a veto works is a city council, the legislative body, will make a decision. They'll vote and they'll make a decision. But then the executive branch, the mayor, has the right to veto that decision, to say, no, I disagree, this is not going to work. Then what happens is that veto goes back to the legislative branch, to the city council, and they vote again on whether or not they're going to override the veto. So that's what they were doing at city council. They were voting on whether they were going to override the mayor's veto of their original vote to fire the McKenna Associates.
One of the things it seems like, too, is these kinds of process questions at Highland Park City Council keep coming up. In this instance, it was the veto. And another interesting thing about Highland Park City Council is their decision to not hire a parliamentarian. Can you talk about, Linnell, what a parliamentarian is and what role they could play at Highland Park City Council?
Yes. So when we first started covering Highland Park City Council in February 2023, it was a brand new council. None of these people had been council members before, and a brand new mayor. And so it's a very interesting time to be able to start covering this group. They were talking about parliamentary procedure at their very first meeting, and either at that meeting or shortly thereafter, they took a vote and decided not to hire a parliamentarian. A parliamentarian is that expert on parliamentary procedure, which is the way meetings are run, making a motion, this stuff about vetoing, overriding, just like how things are supposed to proceed. And most councils do have a parliamentary or a parliamentarian whose job it is to know these rules and help guide them along when questions like this come up.
Caitlin, what impact is this having on the city?
I think that the chaos that happens at Highland Park City Council meetings, the effect that it has on residents and the city itself is it just erodes public trust in city council, and it really diminishes their credibility in the eyes of the public. So regardless of what decisions are made and whether or not they're made, people, the public, Highland Park City Council residents are embarrassed of their city council. Like Linnell said, a parliamentarian helps with that kind of those process questions. So less time can be spent during meetings bickering back and forth about what certain things mean, and more time can be spent on actually talking through the issues, the positives and negatives of making a certain decision and the impact on residents. During council affairs, President Thomas brings up how council members have lives outside of city council and they're doing the best they can with the limited resources they have. having a parliamentarian would help take some of that load off of individual council members.
It's remarkable that Highland Park City Council does actually handle business. They do pass legislation at every meeting. They tend to have 5 council members there, but it's overshadowed by the behavior.
That was our weekly conversation with the Detroit Documenters. We heard from Linnell Herndon and Caitlin Santer. They were speaking with the Metro's Jack Philbrandt. This is the Metro on WDET. Coming up, downtown real estate developments like the new Hudson building are drawing a lot of attention. But small-scale developments can have a big impact on Detroit's neighborhoods. Chase Cantrell of Building Community Value will make the case for local developers in Detroit. That's next here on the Metro. Stay with us.